Alright, welcome back to the McMimi YouTube channel. Today we're going to be going over 4 simple paths that you can replicate and build in your own world. Be first trying out a standard sort of country path, then a more large path, a desert path, and then a city path. So let's first go over to this kind of path. This is a path you could put in any part of your world, in between a town or just connecting some buildings. Could have a farm here. The main point of this path is to just use a few blocks to make it look nice. You start off with coarse dirt, and you can lay out a nice winding path. This is what I always do in my worlds. Come in with some dirt, some regular dirt, but just make sure it's not next to grass, otherwise the grass will grow onto your path, which doesn't look nice. Then you can come in and add some brown concrete powder, some dirt paths, and some rooted dirt. I tend to like to put rooted dirt in sort of the corners where you might imagine you put a bush of some kind in the final product. I think these types of path are great because even if you just had this, it looks pretty nice, but it can really be ameliorated with a few alterations. As you can see, I've demonstrated here with just one rock, a couple of stone buttons, fern, berry bush, some leaves, a little bit of grass, and it feels much more complete. I feel like it's pretty easy to imagine walking through your world and you've got a nice looking path. You can add some boulders, some bushes, even a tree. And then maybe this is in between some of your fields. So it's a pretty easy path. You only need 5 blocks and you can really change it up to anything. But I think adding 5 blocks is pretty important because you sort of have your base coarse dirt. Then you go in and you scatter some of these 4. And you could use other stuff. I just think this combination looks quite pleasant. And then finally, you can just add some bushes and you're done. You really do not have to add like all of this. This is a bit more of a proof of concept, but you can notice how nice this seems. If you put this between your worlds and all you did between your cities or something in your world, and all you had was some bushes, some rocks, just scattered every once in a while, it would look really nice. And that's what we're going for. It's a simple path and it's dead easy. Moving on to a bit more of a harder one, this is a path you might see in a bigger city. If you can imagine this being in the middle of a western town or something. It's sort of dry in the middle because people are packing it down with their feet. And then as you get to the outside, it's a bit browner and darker because the soil is a bit healthier, it's a bit muddier. So I think the best way to do this is to create a winding path. I think winding paths are always good, especially when you're making a bigger one. I think if this was just straight and uniform, it might look a little silly. What we're going for is just to make something look nice. You can see here I've added some bushes where the path ebbs in. It ebbs in here. So this is the center and it kind of goes like that. But you could just as easily replace this with a building, and that's why the path has to kind of curve around the building and then come back out. Just a slight bow. And if you wanted to, you could make it so that the center of the path is actually 2 points. I'll demonstrate here so it can look a bit like maybe a cart track. If you wanted to split the center. So then it's a bit more like someone is riding a cart or something. And really, the most important part is to just make it consistent. If it is over here, ebbing over there, you want to make this side a bit bulkier, you know? It kind of pushes in and then it pushes in there. So the path is consistent on both sides. I think another good rule is to make sure your blocks don't go too far apart. So let me demonstrate. This is the gradient I chose for this path. Spruce into coarse dirt, into mud bricks, into packed mud, into brown mushrooms, into oak planks. So imagine this is the outside block. It's fine for the coarse dirt to touch it, and it's fine for the mud bricks to touch it, but you wouldn't want the packed mud to touch it because it's a bit too far of a jump, you know? It might look a little silly. So when you're putting down the blocks, like the spruce here, you can have the coarse dirt touching the spruce, and you can also have some mud brick touching the spruce. Same thing over here, little mud brick touching the spruce. But I actually messed up here. You probably don't want the oak to be touching the spruce per se. So then we move on. We have a bit of packed mud touching this, but you probably don't want the mushroom blocks to touch this because it would look a little stark, you know, it would look a little silly. So then we can finish that off and then just fill in the middle here. Mushroom blocks are a very underutilized brown block. You can get this from growing a large gray mushroom and then you harvest it and you get this very nice color. And I think it looks very nice with sort of packed mud. So as you can imagine, this is maybe the center and then there's some cart tracks that have worn in to the path and created a very dry look. Whereas on the outside, it's a bit muddier. Not as many people are walking there, and so it's not as worn down. I think this is a very nice proof of concept, and you can use any gradient you want with this. If you wanted to make like another one, you could have like blackstone into like maybe basalt or something. If you just get 6 blocks, 6 or 5 blocks, I think is the ideal. You can create a very nice path down the middle. Also, I didn't mention this. Sorry, this is just some terracotta. I don't really like how it looks that much, though, so I might recommend against doing that. Now we move on to this more desert path. I think this is very similar to that concept, but it's a bit more tight. It's sort of that's like quite wide, you know, this might be like a main street, whereas this is more of a slight path, but it's different than the first one because we're making it sort of not with a gradient, but more of a um, sort of outwards movement, you know? In the middle, this path block is very nice and it looks like a kind of tamped down sand. This can work very well. Then you can add maybe some stripped oak logs, they look nice on the side. And a little stripped spruce log, a birch log, which is a bit more sandy colored. You can come in here with maybe some some oak, maybe some birch. And then I think it's always nice to add stairs in this scenario. For whatever reason, for me, I always think stairs look kind of nice in a sandy build. It's like something about it kind of reminds me of like a shifting sand dune almost, you know? So I think it's nice to add on the outside. And here you've got kind of a nice worn down path. It's sort of the same idea as that one, but on a smaller scale. And you could do this in a forest as well, but I think this looks very nice with a desert type setting. And another factor people need to learn about paths is that some parts of just adding to the outskirts are just as important. Like I said with the first one, if you just add some cactuses here, some dry bushes, some dry grass, it can really benefit the look. It really seems now like sort of something that people are walking on. And maybe they've planted some cacti here to keep away the animals. I don't know. Maybe that as people are walking here, they're dropping seeds and stuff, and that's why more stuff has sprung up around. You just want to add to the story of your world. I think that's the most important part is make things believable. Obviously, this is wood, and it seems kind of funny to put it in a sandy biome, but you just want to create the illusion that someone is walking here. Now, for the last build, this is something that you could put in one of your major cities, sort of a more important, imposing city street. And I think this is an exercise in using proper gradients. Because with the other ones, there's sort of a ebb and a flow to the path as it moves around obstacles. This, you can imagine, is a city street that is very rigid, you know? So you can't have it ebb and flow. And if you just put a big slab of stone bricks, it doesn't look very nice, you know? It doesn't look very good. Like if this was your whole road, it just wouldn't look very nice. I've modeled this next to some water because I think it's sort of how most towns have rivers or canals in them, and you can use the river to give more color to your build. For instance, now that you have your river, you can add some moss on the side and say, well, there's moss growing here because it's quite of a wet environment. Then that just adds a little pop of green over here, which you otherwise wouldn't get, you know? If this was all gray, it's kind of unpleasant to your eyes. Then we can come in here with maybe some cracked stone bricks, some cobblestone. And then with stone, I like to put it because it's kind of seamless, you know? I like to put it in a grouping like this, as if someone has maybe come along and there was a pothole here and then they patched it up. You can also add some buttons, loose flagstone or something, and then some stairs like there's another pothole forming. With this, I do recommend adding, like I said with the other stuff, adding sort of atmosphere to your paths. So since the canal is here, maybe someone's shop is right here, and they have a gutter that's coming down and it's wormed its way into the ground and eroded a sort of channel that flows into the water. With that, then you've got sort of this nice pop of blue in the middle of your otherwise stony build. And once again, you can add some more moss there. I think with this thing, it's just important to, although this looks sort of like block vomit, you might say, it's not what you would be necessarily focused on. If there was a nice building here, you know, a nice grand building, a shop with maybe some wares overflowing, this would be sort of out of your mind. You would just be walking on it and go, okay, it's not this big bland slab of stone brick, but my mind isn't focusing on it because I'm watching this building over here. But it's important to add to your whole build. Otherwise, stuff can sort of look disjointed and not like it's a part of a grander thing. I think you can apply this to any road that you want to be very strict and rigid, and it doesn't have to necessarily be as beaten up as this one. But this just reminds me of maybe a shitty medieval London road next to the Thames, you know? It's sort of worn down, the cobblestones are broken, there's maybe some water leaking through. It's just what you want to think of the build as a whole. And that's about it. If you guys enjoyed, leave a like and drop a comment if you want me to see me build something else. I can go more in depth into some of these or different gradient versions. I'm always game to make more videos. So thank you.